and welcome again to Mindfulness Rewrites. We're so glad that you're back and that you're continuing to watch our introductions to mindfulness and practices that are especially important during the coronavirus. And tonight, I am honored to have a guest on our show, and that is Samantha Miles, our granddaughter. And I have been really honored to share her journey into womanhood and to be there as she's learned the lessons of relationships. And I think it's important to learn them as much as you can when you're out what works for you and what doesn't. And mindfulness can be a powerful tool for that. The poet Rainier Rilke said, we need to learn to love the questions and hold them close to our heart, but we have to live our way to the answers. And Samantha has been living the questions as a teenager and now as a young woman about what works and what doesn't work. So Samantha, what would you say are the most important things you've learned about yourself in relationships? What have you discovered about yourself by making mistakes in relationships?
I would say what I've discovered about myself would probably be to just, always like be happy and be true to yourself and be honest with yourself. Um, I remember like in my past relationships, I wasn't completely honest with myself and straightforward about what was actually going on in the relationship. And I was so blindsided by it all that I truly didn't understand like what was going on. And so I think it's very important to be able to recognize that and be honest.
Yeah, to be honest with yourself. And one of the questions in mindfulness, Samantha, is what is real? Asking yourself what is real, because so often in relationships we get into magical thinking, like
Right.
they're going to change tomorrow, or if I just say the right thing it's going to work, or maybe I didn't get their attention enough, instead of dropping into yourself as you've learned to do and say, is this working for me? And
Right.
nobody's going to be 100% happy in a relationship, but most of the time you should be humming along and feel like you can be yourself, you can be honest,
Right.
and that you're growing, and
Right.
not that you're kind of stuck in the same old patterns.
Yeah.
Samantha, what would you say, what kind of advice would you give young women who are trying to learn relationship lessons?
I would say that if you're in a relationship, um, make sure that it's, there's two sides to the relationship where, you're giving and you're receiving. And, you want to be happy in your relationship and you want to be open and honest because if you're not, and if you don't have trust, you really don't have a relationship. Um, and a lot of like teenage girls will get so attached to like the physical part or emotional part of the relationship
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
can't take a step back and see what's truly going on around them. And I think that's like super important, to realize because you don't want to, you know you do the dance where you're chasing them trying to fix something when and they keep taking a step back instead of you taking a step back and realizing what's truly going on in the relationship.
Yeah, basically what you're talking about is the skill of being able to think about what we feel, to be able to kind of step out of it enough and really step out of the dance that you're doing with that person. Because so often women think if they just come after the guy, that he's going to get it. If
Right.
they, and so they keep coming after him, and then the guy steps back, and they come after him again, and they step back more, and the woman keeps getting hurt and hurt and hurt.
Right.
And I think it's so important for young women to stay out of that dance.
I agree.
So, yeah, so you're talking about really the lessons of inner, it's what I call, Samantha, inner leadership as opposed to external leadership. You are your own leader. You keep your integrity. You follow what's important to you. You're not just reacting to what this guy is doing.
Right.
Um, and being honest with yourself and
Being true
learn,
to yourself.
yeah, being true to yourself and not just doing things where you're trying to get that person to do something
Right.
instead of being true to yourself. There was a famous mythology teacher, Joseph Campbell, and Joseph Campbell said that world mythology teaches us a very important lesson, and that is the lesson that we need to follow. He said, follow your bliss. Follow what makes you happy in your work, in your love, in your play. And that's such a good guide. And that's what you're talking about, is about having inner leadership. So the other thing I want to ask you about, Samantha, because I want to share this. I was so impressed how you handled your last breakup, because you let him know it wasn't that you didn't care about him, that you
Right.
did care about him as a person, but you had such compassion for him,
Hmm.
and you reached out to his family because they'd been very good to you.
Right.
And I'm wondering, how were you able to do that? Because a lot of young people cannot do that and have such compassion. How
Well,
did you do?
so my past relationship, we dated for about 10 months, broke up, and then I got back together. And, at first it was a little rocky, and then, it got a little bit better. And then I eventually kind of noticed the signs again that, I wasn't as happy. There wasn't really trust in the relationship anymore. Um, and if you don't have that, you shouldn't put yourself in that situation. And it was hard to cut it off, but at the same time, you have to realize, like, do you want to be with this person in the long run? Like, are you going to marry? Is this somebody that you want to have long term? Is this somebody that you want to eventually marry? You have to think about those things. Do you guys have the same morals and values? Because if you're dating, like, people change, like, people
Yes,
are changing, like, you don't know, like, it's hard to realize that. But if you take a step back and look at the actual picture and, like, what's truly going on, um
yes,
it helps you, like, make that decision, obviously. um and I'm happy I did, obviously, because I am happy, being single now. I don't have any stress anymore. um you know because in my past relationship, I felt like I was always, like, going after it, trying to fix things constantly, trying to always be there. It honestly felt like I was already married, trying to deal with situations like that. And we're so young at this age, where we shouldn't have to put ourselves in those stressful and serious situations. Because,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah,
And honestly, too, Samantha, it's so hard to really get it. We hear it all the time. You can't change the other person.
right,
And as many times as we hear it, it's so important to be able to pull into yourself and keep going. Is this working for me?
right,
Is this true for me?
yeah,
Is this what works for me? Um, and using your feelings as a guide, as opposed to, this is what I think he is supposed to do.
right. Yeah, and I definitely had my faults where, I was always, like, arguing, yelling, trying to fix the situation, like, saying, "You're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, do this, do that," just always beating down, which doesn't do anything at the end of the day. Because, if you're not happy with what's going on, like, you need to just cut it off. You don't want to keep fighting and fighting and fighting, because it's just going to wear both people down at the end of the day.
Yes. Sam, how were you able to keep your heart open at the end? And break up in a conscious way just by saying this isn't working instead of telling him everything that was wrong with him?
I think honestly, like, God definitely helped me do that, and
Mhm.
having a relationship with Him, um,
Yes.
like, just, like, praying, talking to Him about it, um, like, literally felt like He was holding my hand while I was, like, like, having the breakup and stuff like that, as, like, hard as it was, like, I knew it was like the right thing to do. Like I did for even for both people, not just for me, but for him. So,
Yeah.
but I definitely think that having a relationship with God is really important. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So that whole value of love one another as thyself, what you realized is you couldn't do that with him.
right,
You weren't able to do both. And you were able to break up in a really caring and compassionate way.
right,
And what we know is that practices like mindfulness and prayer
hmm,
help give you that peaceful place that you're talking about.
right,
That peaceful place where it's not all the drama. It's just, it doesn't work.
right.
And being able to take that step back in a conscious way. So, well, I really appreciate you doing this.
Of
Is there
course.
anything else you would want to share with young women?
Um, I would just say that if you're in a relationship now and you're kind of going back and forth and not knowing exactly what to do or not sure, like maybe you could fix it, maybe you can't, I would honestly just take the time to take a step back and think about the situation and just pray, because that's exactly what I did and that's exactly what helped me. And I've never been happier in my entire life.
Mm.
I'm finally able to focus on myself and be independent. So, and I'm at peace, which is nice. So that's what I would.
Yes. So you have peace of mind,
Yes.
and good relationships ought to help bring us peace of mind.
And now I know what
Now,
to look for in the long run too.
yes, you do. You do. Well, thank you, Samantha. This has been very meaningful. And thank you for the people that joined in. And we will continue next week with Mindfulness Rewrites.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I appreciate it.
Okay. Good night, Sam.
Good night.